The training hall of Citadel Vareth smelled like ozone and old blood. It always did. 300 species had bled on these floors over the centuries, some in practice, some in pride, and a few in the terrible mistake of underestimating the wrong opponent. The walls were lined with the crests of champions. Alien sigils, carved in stone, each marking a warrior who had stood unchallenged in this hall. None of them were human. That, Kael Veyron intended to keep that way. He stood at the center of the sparring ring, arms folded across his chest, watching the new intake cadets file in for their assessment. His crest, a silver serpent coiled around a fist, gleamed on the wall directly above the entrance, positioned so every trainee would see it the moment they walked in. A subtle reminder. A territorial declaration. This hall is mine. Kael was Draviki, a species engineered by millennia of clan warfare into something close to perfection, at least by their own estimation. 7 feet of layered muscle, reinforced skeletal structure, triple-jointed limbs built for leverage and torque. He had won the Citadel Championship 4 consecutive cycles. He was the combat training champion, officially designated to assess new cadets. In practice, that meant breaking them quickly, so they understood their place. He scanned the line. Most of the intake were species he recognized, Yethri with their 4 arms, Kralin heavies built like mobile fortresses, a few telepaths who had no business in a combat program but enrolled anyway for spiritual growth. He'd crush them all gently. Some would cry. That was fine. Crying was honest. Then his gaze landed on her. Human. Female. Medium height, perhaps 5 feet 7 inches by Terran measurement, with an athletic build that looked almost slight compared to the other cadets. Dark hair pulled back in a tight braid. Gray eyes that moved around the room with a quiet, careful attention. She wore standard-issue Citadel grays, no rank markings yet, just the small bronze pin on her collar that identified her as a Deathworld cadet. Mara Ellison. He had glanced at her file earlier. 23 Terran years. Background in something called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Krav Maga, and military combatives. She had served 18 months in what the Terran files described as a high-intensity conflict zone before applying to the Citadel program. Her assessors had flagged her physical conditioning as exceptional for her species. For her species. Kael had almost smiled reading that. Humans were Deathworld stock, yes. That earned them a modicum of respect in the halls of the Citadel. The ecological brutality of Terra was well documented, and the psychological resilience it produced was statistically notable. But resilience was not strength. Endurance was not leverage. And no amount of psychological toughness rewrote the physics of mass and reach. He would be gentle with her. He would make it instructional. Cadet Ellison. She stepped forward from the line without hesitation. Her boots made no sound on the floor. He noticed, faintly, that she had already noted all 3 exits. Interesting habit. You are today's demonstration subject, Kael announced to the assembled cadets. He gestured to the ring. Standard assessment. We observe your instincts under controlled contact. You will not be harmed. Mara Ellison looked at him for a moment. Not up at him, he was a full foot and a half taller, but at him. Level. Unhurried. Understood, she said. They took position in the ring. Kael settled into his assessment stance, open, relaxed, deliberately non-threatening to allow the cadet to initiate or receive. He would control the pace. He always did. He reached out, slow, telegraphed, the standard dominant entry he used on every new cadet, and grabbed her wrist. The intent was clear to every experienced fighter in the room. Establish contact, demonstrate control, let them feel the difference in strength. It was a teaching moment. A gentle awakening to hierarchy. What happened next was not gentle. It was not slow. It was not what anyone in that room had been expecting. Mara Ellison did not panic. She did not pull away. She did not freeze. Her body had already moved before his grip fully closed, a quarter step offline, her free hand rising to meet his elbow. The geometry of it was almost mathematical. She wasn't fighting his strength. She was redirecting the vector. His own grip, the grip he had used to control opponents twice her mass, became a liability. The leverage she applied at his elbow forced rotation at the shoulder, not painful yet, just committed, and suddenly his 7-foot frame was bending forward because the physics of a triple-jointed limb, when torqued correctly at the third joint, allowed only one direction. Down. He caught himself. Of course he caught himself, he was a 4-cycle champion. He shifted his weight, planted, began to counter. And she let him. That was the thing that would stay with the watching cadets long after the day was over. She let him recover, straightened up, released the hold cleanly, and stepped back to neutral. As if she was waiting to see what he would do next. As if she had not just folded a Draviki combat champion toward the floor using nothing but angle and joint knowledge. The hall was absolutely silent. Cale stared at her. Mara Ellison looked back at him with those gray eyes, not triumphant, not smug, not even particularly engaged. She looked like someone who had done a moderately interesting thing and was mildly curious about what came next. He attacked properly this time. No more assessment pace. She moved like water finding a crack in stone. Twice he reached her and found grip that immediately became a problem. Once he swept low and she was simply not there, her weight having shifted a half-second before his leg moved. She had read the tell, some microsignal in his hip or shoulder that she had apparently catalogued in the first 30 seconds of engagement. She circled. She deflected. She did something with her forearm against his inner wrist that briefly made his entire right hand numb. And she never once tried to outpower him. That was the education. That was the thing that began to work its way, slowly, like cold water, through the layered confidence that Cale Veyron had been building for 4 championship cycles. She wasn't trying to beat him. She was demonstrating that his advantages size, mass, reach, raw power, were not the complete variables he had always understood them to be. That they could be managed. That a smaller, lighter body with better information about leverage and momentum could reroute force like a river reroutes around a stone. He was the stone. He had always been proud of being the stone. She was showing him what water did to stone, given enough geometry. He stopped. Not because he was hurt. Because he understood, with the clarity that only comes to genuinely skilled fighters, what was happening. He was being taught. He was being taught in front of his cadets, on his floor, under his crest, by a 23-year-old human woman who had the audacity to look faintly patient about the whole thing. "Hold," he said. She stopped immediately. Returned to neutral. Waited. Cale straightened. Rolled his shoulder. Looked at her for a long moment. "Where did you train?" he asked. His voice was level. He was proud of that. "Earth," Mara said. Then a conflict deployment. Then more Earth. "Your submission mechanics," he said carefully. "The joint work at the elbow. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Foundation, modified for multi-limb opponents." She paused. "I spent my first year here studying Draviki skeletal anatomy specifically. Your third joint is an advantage in power but a liability if the torque angle is correct. I mapped it before I arrived." Another silence. Somewhere at the back of the watching line, a Yethri cadet made a very small, involuntary sound. "You mapped it," Cale repeated. "Humans do that," Mara said simply. "When we know we're going to be outmatched physically, we study. We find the geometry. We figure out what the stronger thing can't compensate for." She tilted her head slightly. "We've been doing it since we were climbing down from trees to fight things with bigger teeth." Cale Veyron, combat training champion, for consecutive cycles, silver serpent crest on the wall above the door, stood quietly for a moment. Then he did something that surprised every being in that room, including, slightly, Mara Ellison. He inclined his head. A Draviki gesture. A formal one. The kind extended to a worthy opponent. "You will assist me in reforming the joint vulnerability curriculum," he said. "Beginning next cycle." Mara Ellison nodded once. Professional. Unhurried. "Yes, sir." She walked back to the line. The other cadets gave her a slightly larger radius of space than before. No one said anything. Above the entrance, the silver serpent crest gleamed on the wall. Beneath it, for the first time in 4 cycles, Veyron was thinking about something other than his own invincibility. He was thinking about what else he didn't know. Some species built their dominance on size. Some on speed. Some on strength. Humans built theirs on the understanding that dominance itself was just a pattern, and every pattern, if you studied it long enough, had a counter. Mara Ellison had studied long enough.